The Prison Boss Narcissist, Seducer. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. If you haven't watched my video about the Prison Boss Narcissist, I would encourage you to do so, as it will help you understand more about the dynamic between a female abuser and a male victim who is the intimate partner primary source, as I dissect the nature of their relationship. I also explain to you her school and cadre in a follow-up video, which is very useful for you continuing to extend and expand your understanding of narcissism. Unsurprisingly, more information has now come out about the behaviour of the prison boss narcissist. In other words, more information about Cherie Spencer, which is unsurprising, accords with the finding that she's a narcissist, and shows us more aspects of her narcissism in action. The information is contained in a Mail Online article from Kevin Donald. It states, revealed, prison reform boss who drunkenly beat her husband, lack of emotional empathy, assertion of control, every day after downing white wine, went on to steal her best friend's partner after the couple welcomed her into their home. So not only has she breached trust, but she has demonstrated an absence of emotional empathy for her best friend. She has shown no emotional empathy for her husband by cheating on him with somebody else. That she has interfered in an existing relationship, demonstrating a sense of entitlement, and demonstrating once again the nature of the narcissist with regard to taking somebody else's relationship and shitting all over it in the pursuit of the prime aims. I explained elsewhere that she's likely to be a somatic narcissist, and therefore this underpins that as a consequence of engaging in such behaviours where she commits the act of infidelity and lures somebody else away from their relationship. This, of course, is done to assert control over the individual by using sex as a major method of seduction. The Mail reports a prison reform boss jailed for subjecting her husband to 20 years of humiliating abuse and assaults, assertion of control, various manipulations, stole the partner of her best friend who let her live in their home. Showing a lack of accountability for her behaviours and throwing the empathic, good-natured hospitality shown to her back in the face of her friend. Businesswoman Caroline Grant told how Cherie Spencer drank mugs of wine at 7 a.m, excessive drinking, lack of accountability, and spent evenings drunkenly flirting, lack of boundary recognition, with her partner, Adrian Taylor. Miss Grant told Mail Online, when Cherie's marriage broke down, I was the only person who stood by her, showing her empathic nature, or at least possibly as a normal in terms of the empathic trait of compassion, caring, support. And then she thanked me by stealing my partner. Spencer, 45, was jailed for 4 years after making her husband Richard Spencer's life a living hell, with daily beatings, manipulation, physical assault, and verbal attacks, verbal insult, manipulation, that left him cowering on the floor in a fetal position. A judge called her treatment of him the worst case of coercive and controlling behaviour I have seen. Miss Grant, 46, at first turned a blind eye to Spencer's chemistry with Mr. Taylor, 52, or rather, of course, the application of sexual seduction, of hoovering him into a sexual relationship, when she and Adrian were drinking together and acting like a pair of giddy teenagers around each other. Even though there were alarm bells sounding, I felt sure that nothing would happen after I'd given her a home in her time of need. Some people might say that's naive. It's certainly the case that there's a red flag flying and she didn't pay proper attention to it. But Cherie only cares about Cherie, self-absorption, sense of entitlement. She seduced Adrian from right under my nose. Lack of emotional empathy, interference in somebody else's relationship. Miss Grant met Spencer, a high-ranking official in the prisons and probation service, when their daughters became friends at a school just outside York. The girls had play dates, and their mothers became friends. Thus Miss Grant becomes a non-intimate secondary source. but Miss Grant was surprised to find she was the person that Spencer turned to when her marriage to Mr. Spencer, 46, came to an end. But unknown to Miss Grant, the police were investigating Spencer for her treatment of Mr. Spencer. This included beating him with a wine bottle, scratching, punching and kicking him, and forcing him to clean up after she had defecated on the floor. Belittlement, assertion of control through various manipulations. Miss Grant, a relocation specialist, only knew that Spencer and her husband were separating. She said, "When I eventually became aware of what she had been doing to Richard, like everyone else, I was horrified. But by then, she was already living in my home and was settled. Lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement." In July 2021, she told me she was staying with a friend because she and Richard had split up. She said it wasn't a particularly good situation because she was having to share a room with her friend's son. I invited her to spend a night at mine and Adrian's home, but as it turned out, she would end up spending months with us. Lack of boundary recognition, sense of entitlement, abuse of hospitality. Earlier on, of course, a pity play by lamenting the circumstances of her accommodation. She blamed Richard, blame shifting, the poor man whose life she'd actually ruined, for the split, saying he had faked evidence which had got her arrested. Pity play, blame shifting, projection. I believed everything she told me. It's hard to describe how incredibly plausible she is. She's a skilled liar, and I believed what she said. The first night she was here, she and Adrian started drinking wine and got smashed together. It should have been a warning sign at the very start, but I just couldn't see that. Spencer made herself comfortable at Miss Grant's large detached home on the outskirts of York. Sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition. She worked from home in her high-flying role as a project manager in the Strategic Development Department with HM Prisons and Probation Service. It was a role that brought her into contact with the highest levels of government, and she bragged, grandiosity, about meetings with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Ms. Grant said, "She told me she worked 2.5 days a week for a salary of £55,000, which was an incredible waste of taxpayers' money because she spent her days getting drunk. Lack of accountability, shirking of work. I saw her one morning with a mug of wine at 7 a.m. This was supposed to be a working day, but she spent her days lying in bed with a bottle of wine. It's incredible that she kept a publicly funded job." She did so by giving a sob story about her marriage breaking down, pity play, but that was nowhere near the whole truth. Miss Grant and her father, Jerry Grant, 76, who lives with her, began to become suspicious that Spencer and Mr. Taylor were becoming too close. She said they were spending their time getting drunk every night. They liked to sit in a garden room we have, which we call the cabin, and would be up swearing and shouting and laughing long after I had gone to bed. Seduction of the husband. I knew my dad was starting to have concerns, but I told myself that neither of them would do such a thing under the roof of our family home. I couldn't have been more wrong. It's such a betrayal. I even gave up the master bedroom for her so that she would be comfortable. Her father said, "I started to feel as though something was going on. I'd see them sitting under a blanket together, and it seemed to me as though they might be getting amorous. I said to Caroline that I had my suspicions about them. It just didn't seem right. She was loud and swore and drank all the time, and she tried to get me to lend her £12,000 for legal fees, asset appropriation, lack of boundary recognition. I was on the verge of doing it, but I'm so glad I didn't." Ms. Grant's suspicions were aroused further when Spencer began sharing details of her dealings with men. She said, "Cherie told me she cheated numerous times on Richard. Repeated infidelity. She liked to go to Leeds and hook up with younger men. That was her way of getting kicks. Receipt of fuel. She also said she'd had an affair with a married man who was helping her with money. Interference with relationship, infidelity, residual benefit of money." Spencer stayed with Miss Grant until October 2021, when she was arrested for the years of abusing her husband. At that point, she moved into a house in Market Weighton, East Yorkshire. Ms. Grant said, "I was asking Adrian whether he and Cherie were having an affair, and he denied it despite spending so much time at her new home. People will think I was naive, but I'm a trusting person, and I believed it until he eventually told me just before Christmas, yes, we've been having an affair, and I'm in love with her. He moved out on Boxing Day 2021 and moved in with Cherie. He becomes the intimate partner primary source for Cherie. It was though she had some kind of trophy on his arm. He introduced her to his family soon afterwards. He'd moved on completely. We'd been together since 2014, but he'd fallen hook, line and sinker for Cherie, and despite living in my home, she had reciprocated. The only satisfaction Miss Grant can take from Spencer's time with her is that one member of her household meted out some summary justice, her cockerel the godfather. She said the godfather hated Cherie from the start and would attack her whenever she left the house. On one occasion she fell over and he flew at her, pecking her head. I take a little bit of satisfaction from that. The godfather is clearly a better judge of character than I was. I'm lucky to be rid of both of them from my life, and my daughter and I and my dad are very happy together in our home. Mr. Taylor accompanied Spencer to hearings at Hull Crown Court, which culminated in her being jailed on February the 24th for 4 years. It then details more of the behaviour which I've mentioned previously. This, of course, just adds further evidence to the finding that she is a narcissist and demonstrates more with regard to the forms of manipulations, lack of accountability, sense of entitlement, absence of emotional empathy, lack of boundary recognition that underpins what she is and affirms, of course, her status as a somatic narcissist. Ultimately, it still supports that she's likely to be seen as lower mid-range also, and demonstrates the behaviour of the somatic narcissist in having repeated affairs and going on to seduce somebody away from somebody else despite living under that person's roof. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.